O my people, remember now what King Balak of Moab devised, what Balaam son of Beor answered him, and what happened from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know before the saving acts of the Lord. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come to him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul.
Today's scripture reading is a pleasant one for many of us, since Micah 6:8 is a beloved life verse for so many. It's the verse that my husband and I chose for Felicity's dedication, and many of you have named with me that Micah 6:8 is your life verse. And so today we're diving into part of this chapter that brings forth this verse. So Micah himself is a contemporary of Isaiah, the prophet in Judah, and Hosea in Israel. He may have known Amos, who was a little older than him and lived not too far from him. But in order to understand the breadth of this passage and its context, we need to zoom out a little bit to view that political landscape that surrounds Micah and his prophecy. So some background to Judah and its leadership. So Judah at this time is the southern kingdom, and Israel is the northern kingdom. And Judah under King Uzziah was immensely wealthy because of its success in wars and bringing their commerce and agriculture back to life. And as is often the case with having a lot of wealth, Uzziah, despite being right with God most of the time, he becomes prideful and he goes into the temple to make a sacrifice. And in those days, only the priests who were descendants of Aaron could do that. And so Uzziah is struck with this defiling disease, and he's isolated for the rest of his life. And then his son Jotham succeeded him, who did what was right in the sight of the Lord. And Judah had a few peaceful years. And then his son Ahaz succeeded him, who was not right with God. And he tries to be like the leaders in the northern kingdom who have forgotten God and who worship other idols. And he casts idols and he worships Baal and he sacrifices his own children. And Ahaz decides to seek help from Assyria with a political alliance, which just ends up punishing Judah more. And so Judah is in an interesting place politically because the northern kingdom of Israel has already been conquered by Assyria and Judah has supposedly been spared. However, they are still subjugated to Assyria. They pay heavy tributes to that nation. They can't govern themselves and are religiously influenced by Assyria. And so throughout all of these rulers and leaders, Judah has lost its compass, and Judah's people are morally bankrupt, and they are driven by greed. The wealthy enlarge their own possessions and wealth by driving away small landowners, and there is a very strong current of taking advantage of the weak and the oppressed that Micah picks up on. Those who have very little are robbed or taken advantage of. Business owners cheat their customers, and judges are bought with bribery. It is a dark time to be God's people. And as the prophet Micah says, the people of Judah will face God's punishment for ignoring the teachings of God for so long. So prophets like Micah, Isaiah, Amos, and Hosea, these are difficult books to read, because it is a lot of doom and gloom. But these prophets have come to be a light of God's justice. And these prophets are often very lonely because they alienate themselves from the society by proclaiming their wrongdoing. And many of these prophets are brokenhearted themselves by the deeds of their people. Micah himself has times of lament in chapter 7. And it's difficult to realize and study that these beautiful words from Micah that many of us hold as a life verse come from a dark period and a very dark book in our Bible. How do we know it is well with our hearts during such a time as this? So let us dwell on what it means to be well with our heart. Part of wellness is being brave enough to assess where we stand, how we're doing with our body, mind, and heart and soul. And the pastors, we have created these great assessments for you to take. Perhaps you're scared like me of the results, and you haven't taken any of them. But we can be brave together and try at least one this week, knowing that God loves us deeply and our worth is not tied to the outcome of these assessments. But thinking about the heart this week, especially with this week's news of Israel and Palestine, with increasing reports of food and water, fuel and electricity being cut off in Gaza, to the terrorist group Hamas killing Israelis, to stories of last words with loved ones and children dying, it is difficult to say, "It is well with my heart." I'm sure you have been grappling with it as well. And I began this week reflecting on what being well in my heart really means. I'll be honest, sometimes I really do not like my heart. I don't like how sensitive it is, or how easily it is bruised. I don't like that it can't handle movies about the death of an animal. So Marley and Me, Get Away From Me, or any of those Sarah McLachlan commercials. And I really can't consume any media without a happy ending or comedic twist. I fear my heart's power in feeling and its ability to overtake me. And sometimes I wish I could pass through life unencumbered by painful emotions or events. Lately, I have selfishly wished I didn't have a day of being gut-punched by the news. Many times, I don't want to feel the pain that I feel, and I don't want to feel others' pain as well. And being a pastor means you are on the front line for hearing how life can go wrong, whether that's in the lives of your parishioners, or people coming in who need resources, or people you meet on the street and you tell them you're a pastor, and it breaks your heart. We bear our burdens together in community, and in a way that makes the burdens lighter, but it's still painful. I think many other people feel this way, whether they acknowledge it or not. Hence why we can be so bad at knowing what to say when met with others' heartbreak. And so that's where those terrible sayings of everything happens for a reason, or God needed another angel, or God wouldn't put you through anything you can't handle came from. And we literally cannot handle the emotion of that moment, the mystery of our suffering, that we came up with these platitudes that either blame God for why things happen, or we try to tell the person it's not so bad and here's one good thing about this terrible situation. It's so hard for us humans to sit in those hard feelings with others. But like all parts of our wellness, soul, mind, body, and heart, they're going to respond to stimuli. And many times you cannot control how your parts will respond. You cannot control if your heart is going to break. And that lack of control can be debilitating and terrifying. You don't know what news you will wake up to. You don't know what phone call you will receive. You don't know what will be on the prayer list at church. And if you don't manage that well, the anxiety of it all can exhaust you. So how do we navigate this truth, especially in that context of striving to be well? Surely, being brokenhearted by the grief of the world is not the only requirement to be well. Micah gives us an answer to this amidst his own context of being grief-stricken by his world, forgetting their God and the immense suffering because of it. So a heart that chases after wealth and profit is not what God requires, and we learn that many times. We were not created by a God who demands symbols of status, animals and oil and offspring. And in fact, God calls us to cast those off when we think of what's acceptable in God's sight. But there is an act that God requires, and I think Micah redefines sacrifice for us. And it's harder and it's much more long-term than sacrificing a fatted calf. But the act is this: resisting your own inclination to protect only yourself, so we can turn our hearts towards justice, mercy, and humility. If our hearts are not turned toward God and toward justice, mercy, and humility, then those religious practices mean nothing. It reminds me a little bit of the strong and convicting words from Amos 5. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. The heart is at the center of all of this, friends. It's the attitude of our heart, what our heart is turned to, that defines everything. And how do we allow our hearts to be turned and shaped and defined by justice, mercy, and humility? Well, a large part of that is allowing that heart to be broken. It is a difficult but beautiful truth. A broken heart is one that is stirred to follow God's teachings. You see, being well in your heart doesn't mean that we don't have those hard and painful feelings. It doesn't mean being completely at peace. Heart wellness does not involve cutting off our heart's ability to feel. In fact, that was a large part of the problem with Judah's people. They were so solely focused on their greed and their wealth, so far from the moral and religious teachings of God, that they turned off their heart's ability to feel compassion, to feel their moral compass telling them something is not right, and to feel the call of justice. Turning off our hearts is not the answer to wellness. In fact, it's a quick way to make sure you and your world are not well. It reminds me of a C.S. Lewis quote that I love, that I have referenced in a sermon before, I am sure, and one that I cling to when I'm struggling with my sensitive heart. He says, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable." Several times in my life, after trying to turn off my intense ability to feel, I noticed that I felt less myself, but also life just felt much more muted and gray. And I realized that when I was trying to turn off those bad and painful emotions, I was turning off the good ones as well, like gratitude, joy, satisfaction, contentment. I have a whole family that can tell you how sarcastic and cynical I was when I was in this period. You just can't compartmentalize your hearts, my friends. It doesn't work that way. Writer and speaker Glennon Doyle says that life is brutal, but it's also beautiful. Brutiful, I call it. Life's brutal and beautiful are woven together so tightly that they cannot be separated. Reject the brutal, reject the beauty. I truly think that God created all of us with a purpose. And our hearts have a huge purpose. Our hearts are these incredible sensory organs that let us know when gospel work needs to be done. Our hearts, with all of their potential to be shaped and molded and broken and healed, these hearts stir us to compassion, stir us to action, to show us God's love and acceptance, to show that to others, and to stir us to acts of justice. These hearts that break at the news are the same hearts that will shower love and compassion to the hurting and the oppressed. Without our hearts, we can't be God's people. And as we see in Micah, when we cut off our hearts from our gospel work, we lose our way. Instead of being stirred by compassion and mercy, we are stirred by this glitz and glamour of only caring for ourselves. God created our hearts with a purpose. God created humanity with a heart that is stirred with compassion, moved to mercy, and strives for justice of the oppressed. And God needs our hearts, friends. God relies on these hearts, these beautiful, complicated, sensory things that guide us and break us and heal us. And it's a powerful, brutal truth that our hearts being broken open is what allows us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. And this heart that can be broken helps me and you do ministry. You cannot do it without it. And this heart helps me feel more alive and experience all the pain in life, yes, but all the good in life as well. Being well in our heart means allowing our hearts to be shaped and changed, to be vulnerable and open to the bad news of the world that may come our way, while also being open to the feeling of joy and gratitude that life brings. And it's so hard. It's brutal. I don't always give thanks for the news, or never give thanks for the news, really, that does break my heart. But I do give thanks for my heart and yours. A heart that can feel, a heart that grieves, a heart that cries, that's moved with compassion, stirred to justice for the downtrodden and the oppressed, and a heart full of mercy. When our hearts feel and are moved to gospel work, it is well with our hearts indeed. Amen.